Betsy had to give me access.
Is it ready?
Oh yeah, are there any people in a way? There's no waiting room for this one. I think people can just join whenever.
No waiting room. I think everybody should be able to share as there should be no protections.
Yeah. Okay. Just wanted to check. 'Cause I think I'm a co-host.
Well,
You can bring me a
welcome
cookie if you would.
I'd like a cookie too.
Yeah.
Well, welcome everybody. For those that haven't been here before, this is Shed Talks. This is our virtual event series where we have different artists or writers or different creative people come in.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a lot of
Get to share some of their work.
lists. So you know that you can do.
I already did it.
Oh, you went down here.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, so tonight we've got James Herbst. The way this normally goes is James is going to share his screen and he's going to discuss some of his work and process for a little while. And then we're just going to have a little brief interlude. And then everybody is free to ask questions, comments, which I'm sure there's going to be lots. So with that, James, do you want to take it over?
Okay, well, thank you, Rebecca. And I wanted to thank you for making this possible and for Clayton Herbst, my nephew, for germinating this situation by presenting some images to some friends of his. And I guess that's how it all started. I am not normally a person who does presentations, so forgive a little bump here and there. But I think I would just like to sort of start with a little bit of my background and eventually get into the images. I came from a creative family. My father in particular gave us all a little nudge into one direction or another of being creative. I found by the time I got to college that I had a desire to start doing artwork more seriously in terms of studio work. My friend who is present here, Doug Semivan, introduced me to printmaking, and that's kind of how I got started. Hi, Doug. That's kind of how I got started in the direction that I've ended up in my life in terms of all the different aspects. I think I started out doing intaglio and etching in particular, working in really fine detail, and also started working in photography a bit. And the thing that I found in common with both was this sense of working with a matrix. With etchings, it was working on a plate. Working with photography, it was working with negatives. In both instances,
yeah,
they
we'll set
were
up an
a
appointment.
step towards a finished product. So I went through 4 years of undergraduate work. And what do you do with an art degree? Well, you go on and work on your master's, put off whatever you might have to do after that. So I went to New England, hadn't ever been there before, but I was a double major for a while in history and had an interest in New England. So I ended up in New England working for a year at the Hartford Art School, both in printmaking as an adjunct faculty member, and also dabbled for a semester in electronic music back in 1971, 72. Came back to Michigan and finished my master's work at Cranbrook in printmaking and did some photography there as well. And then headed back to New England. I had a family to support at the time, so adjunct faculty wasn't cutting it, and I ended up picking up the painting trade while I was doing graduate work, and I sort of fine-tuned that into working in historical houses, got a love for patina, started to understand about color, changed lives in 1985, came up to Boston and started working in decorative finishes. And I think this is part of where there's a sort of a connection with the architects out there, in that I did a lot of work working. I mean, primarily what I did was, some people call it decorative painting, some people call it architectural painting, but doing faux finishes, working with designers, architects, decorators. And I spent years with a wall surface at an arm's length. So I got very caught up in detail, and that was part of what led me into my more recent work in photography, which I'll be sharing with you in a minute. I kept going with collage work starting in the late 1960s. And with a lack of press, I stopped really printmaking around 1980. But I kept up with my collage work, and on and off. And more recently, in the last several years, I've really picked up and been doing a lot of it. And that in photography are sort of the two sources of work that I do. I found that the thing that they all have in common, besides this notion of a matrix, I think of the negative, or now digital photography itself, but the negative in particular is being a witness to the capture of the moment. The prints sort of come after the fact off the negative, in sort of the same way that, you know, when you're working on a plate or something, you're thinking of what the final product's going to be, but you're anticipating it, but the work is on the matrix. And so I've always had this sense of process. I worked in decorative painting for 30 years and more here in the Boston area. Went as far afield as France and Greece, New York City, a number of gigs, but primarily it was in the metropolitan Boston area. I kind of read a bit about the Shed Group in terms of your philosophy on architecture, and I think that one of the things that I still do today, and I'll share that with you with some of my imagery, it's all about collaboration in a way. It's not about the individual coming up with a particular notion. For me, in my experience, it was collaboration. So when I was doing a lot of decorative work, it was working with designers, architects. They'd have their own visions. There were times when I would supply, did a lot of color stuff. But it was, it was working with surfaces and creating a hominess, a sense of a place to live. A lot of times I was working in soulless slabs of concrete with glass, and these were places to be made into homes. So I retired 2 years ago, and I've been pretty active in my artwork. So I'm going to segue from this into the images. So I'm going to disappear as a talking head and go to pictures. And I'll be back. I'll be talking as I go along. Let's see. First of all, I got to go here and go here. Share. Okay, let's see. There we go. Okay, I'm going to start by just showing you a little bit of the decorative stuff that I was doing before I get into the actual artwork that I do. This was this is, again, talking about collaboration. This was a ballroom at the Union Club in Boston, and we had to restore all the surfaces, and that included all the stenciling that was done on silver leaf. There's other stenciling on the walls, a lot of cleanup on the woodwork, and I worked with 2 other artists on this, and we were there for a couple of months. This was one of the nicer jobs. This one is more recent. I did this with another artist 2 years ago down in Mississippi, sort of a big plantation place, and this is all faux limestone. we both worked on it together, and it was good to have two different people because we came up with two different hands in terms of the actual stonework. And you can see sort of in the background a couple of the blank blocks that haven't been painted in yet. But it's just another example of what I did for a living. And these are just a few of the finishes that I did. This is actually bubble wrap pressed against a surface to give a texture, some crackle. This is a three-dimensional texture where I colored and sanded down and laid washes on with rather complex kind of surface. Almost all of this is wall work with some cabinetry, another distressed kind of look, and some stony rag stuff. This is going into what my source material is. This is where I get a lot of my material for my collages. It's a wonderful alleyway adjacent to a bookstore that's 3 stories high of books. But these are like $5, $3, $1. And I even picked up a second edition Hokusai for $10 that they didn't know about. They put it out there a few years ago when there was a Hokusai exhibition at the MFA. And I gave it to a friend, and it was a wonderful little discovery. This is part of, in my my studio space, this is part of what I use it for my own collection of work. Let's see, what's going on here? I'm gonna have to back off here, go to collage, okay. Now we're gonna go into collages. Okay, this is a collage from about 30 years ago. And I'm just gonna go through them, give you a sense of what it is that I do. These aren't in any chronological order, but it gives you a sense of the different things that I'm involved in. When I'm working with collage, I'm primarily thinking in terms of, I have obviously a lot of source material. I take different disparate elements and I put them together to create new situations, different combinations of things. I had a lot of love for the Dadaists and the Surrealists and Max Ernst, Joseph Cornell, their work with engravings. And so I get involved in that. These things just fall together for me for the most part. Stream of consciousness. I don't really, there are times when I do have an idea to start my work with, but for the most part, I just sort of put different elements in a pile and then I start just putting them together. I often will add a word or two as well to add a little extra to it, but I don't, I try to create things in which I think that they're not necessarily intentional narratives, but I'm creating hopefully something that will elicit a response in the viewer. A lot of these are GIFs. I make digital copies. So in point of fact, even though these are all hand cut, at least a good 97% of them are hand cut, they're all at the same time digital because that's the way you're experiencing them, as digital, not as analog. I feel like I should have some music in the background. I work with music. I listen to a lot of Indian music, classical Hindustani and Carnatic music. And that's the way when I was working in the field, I would start the day with Indian music that would start out slow and then build. You'll see there's some nods. Here's a little Tikirko in the background, in the foreground there. One of the times I was working last year with, for a month, there was a collage group in Edinburgh that was doing a word a day. So I was doing, each day had a different word, and you did a collage a day, basically, for 30 days. And you can see that basically I'm representational, figurative oriented for the most part. I really, the abstract work basically comes in my photography. But I have a variety of sources and a variety of different ways of working. This actually is part of a collage, and I have a different group that I'll show. This is part of a group of collages that's based on my photographs as a substrate. So the background is basically one of my photos, which I'll be sharing those shortly. Sometimes 2 elements is all you need to put something together. This is a piece that I'm doing in a collaborative book with a friend about Dante. I've gone through a couple of periods of working with Dante's comedy, the allegory of life, and I had a small show of that work last year. This is a piece of work on sandpaper. I will be providing contact information at the end of this. So if you want to take a longer look at some of these things, you'll have that opportunity. I have a lot of stuff put on a page on Facebook and Flickr as well.
James,
Part of
would
what
you
I've been doing also is doing collaborative work. And I started doing that about 2 years ago. There was something called the Exquisite Corpse that the Dadists and the Surrealists were doing, where they would fold up a piece of paper, one artist would do a drawing, hand it blindly to the next artist, and they would do a drawing, and then it would be passed around, and ultimately you'd open it up and you'd find a collaborative work by a number of artists all on one piece of paper. I've joined a group. This is probably one of my latest pieces. I've joined a group that does collaborative work with 3 people. And so now we're going to go to some collaborative work. And there's sort of 3 different ways I've been collaborating. This first group, these are working on there's a guy in Austria, in Vienna, who sends out old passports and old bank books and passes them around, and each artist does 2 pages and then sends it on to the next artist. So these are some of the different passbooks that I've worked on. You do 2 pages and then send it on to somebody else. And then ultimately it goes back to the fellow in Vienna who started it all. And again, you get, when you see how everybody has added to it, they're wonderful booklets with usually a dozen or more double pages. And these were my efforts. Another collaboration is working one-on-one with people. I call it halfway measures, where one person starts an image, adds a few elements, and then someone else finishes it. And so these are a few ones that I started and someone else finished them. And this is what we call the neo-exquisite corpse, working with 2 other people. And rather than working blindly like an exquisite corpse, we each have 3 pieces of paper divided into thirds, and we do a top, a middle, and the bottom, and then mail them off to somebody else, and they do 3 different sections, and then they're finished by a third person and then sent back to the people at the beginning. So these are a few different collaborations with 2 other artists. And I've really come to enjoy it. I'm working with people from Barcelona, from New Zealand, from Berlin, Vienna, England, France, Belgium, all over Europe. And the different combinations have different sensibilities. So it's fun to be working with these people and getting completely different kinds of notions. Now this is one that I did. It was a starter, so it was just the bottom section, and this was the finished section after 2 other people worked on it.
James,
Yes, sir.
just a question.
Yes.
The shared collaboration here in these last couple of pieces, are these shared instantly by digitation, or
No,
are they?
everything that I'm doing here, all the shared work, with some minor exception, but everything that I'm sharing here is all hand cut. So
Okay,
it's hand cut and it's packaged up and mailed to Barcelona or wherever it's going next.
that's very cool.
And then it's sent to the next person, and then they work on it. Anybody
Yeah,
that's interested, contact me for collaboration.
So there's time and passage.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And sometimes, given the state of the mail system in Europe and in the States with the virus, you'd think some things are gone for like a month or more before they actually show up again. And it could land on somebody who doesn't work on it for a month. So, part of this too is I've learned not to think of any of this work as being terribly precious, because there's a risk when you send this stuff out that you're never going to see it again.
I don't think that's actually what it's about. I think it's about communication with other people in a tangible way.
Yeah, exactly. And then this is again a one-on-one. A fellow contacted me who wanted to work on stuff with playing cards. So even though you don't see any of the playing card, these are all the size of playing cards. Working with this fellow, we ended up doing 10 each, and then we took turns picking. So I picked some. I got a chance to pick one of his, and he picked one of mine, and we went back and forth. So I have some of his I collected, and some of mine, and vice versa. Another collaboration, working with a guy who works with stamps. So these are postcard sized, working with stamps. And I've only worked with this fellow on a couple. These are 2 that I did with him, working with just stamps and obviously pieces of paper. this is again one-on-one collaborations. Somebody did part of it, and I finished them up for the most part on these three.
And James, is there any communication that goes in advance of these, or is there sort of rules of engagement that are
There are basic rules in the sense that well, but we've shifted the rules. Initially, like for the ones that were divided into thirds, initially they were they're all 6 by 9 inches, and they were divided into 3-inch sections that were 6 inches long and 3 inches deep. But then one of the people I work with wanted to do a diagonal. So we ended up doing a diagonal and with two triangles on it. So, you know, there's some flexibility there, but in terms of sending it off, it's just you're responding to whatever they send to you, or they're responding to what you send to them. So it's pretty loose in that sense. Okay. Now.
Do you ever feel like they're trying to tell you something, or that you are trying in the collaborators that you know? Do you feel like when you do a collage and send it off that you are sort of speaking to them graphically and
Definitely.
vice versa?
Especially when there's people that you've collaborated with a fair amount. To me, it's all about play. It should be. It's all about fun and play and being playful, and so that's what I mean about not being precious. You know, you're when you do this, you're giving somebody something that they might change relatively drastically, and yet you know you're and sometimes it's blind. You work with people, you don't know what you're going to get, but it's fun to anticipate with some of the people that you work with, to know that there's a dance going on between you and the other person or the other people. So now we're going to move into photography, and again, this is going into, this is going into back to the sense of detail. And that is, the first part of it is the natural part of it. This is one of the things that got me going on being present. There's beauty wherever you're sitting in a room and you're looking around, and or you're just taking a walk. There's so much to see if you take the pause and be present. We get so caught up in thinking about, especially in these challenging times at the very least, you can say, of being caught up in what's going on at the moment in terms of worrying about the future, regretting the past, but about being present, about being in the moment and seeing what is around you and being observant. And this is this is taking walks, basically. I call them, just going out and finding a moment, being observant, breathing. It's there. Just look for it.
James, do you feel like the observational photography, like, has that been increasing over the last few months, or is this something that has always been part of your process? And
I think the observational has been kind of the way that I've always worked. Around people, I do take pictures of people as well. I'm a snap shooter. I work with, the camera I work with is a Olympus, a TG5, which is a great point and shoot that you can drop in the water, you can shoot underwater. It's dust proof. I use it for the macro. But before that, I did a lot of work, with silver photography, working with different kinds of cameras. But walking and observing has been something that has been going on with me with photography for certainly 30, 40 years anyway. I'm just sharing sort of the much more recent stuff. And this is what's really been, this is where I'm at in terms of photography for the most part right now. This is, again, oops, hold on. Okay, this is another source, another place for source material. This is an alleyway in Cambridge, and this is where this next group of photographs, and sort of the last group of photographs is coming from. It's a place that's the city allows graffiti artists to come in here and work, and it's constantly changing daily. So I got caught up in not the wall work, but these columns that support the ceiling, that have broadsides on them, and overspray. And the weather leaks down on them, and the papers start to fall apart. And I find that that's, again, part of, here's another version of one of the columns. And I find that is what I'm directed to. So basically they end up being like small paintings. Most of these are from the alleyway. Some of them are from other utility poles for the most part. This is pretty much the last of the work, so then we could talk about if you have questions. All right, so this is where I take my little saunters. I call them saunters. I go for a walk. I was out there today at 40-something degrees, taking some, and these are primarily, I would say something like this is maybe 2 inches by 1.5 inches in terms of detail. But again, it's tied into this notion of there is all this to see. There's all this beauty out there, and I'm just fascinated by what the camera can capture. Ironically, I haven't done much in terms of printing. I was supposed to have a show with my friend Doug this past year in October at our college, and because of the virus, it didn't materialize. And I was trying to figure out, well, how am I gonna do this? Is it gonna be collage, or is it gonna be the photos? Because I'm very fond of this work, but I haven't figured out what to do about printing it. And that's, so it's all basically right now, it's digital information.
We could get the monitors, or you could spend the money.
Yeah, both, either one, sure. The monitor, a monitor would certainly be a good solution as well.
I'm intrigued by the fact that this series of images is in some ways like you're recording the collaboration between graffiti artists. You know, in your attention to detail of these columns that might separate graffiti panels or something like that is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's part of what I enjoy too, and it's interesting because again, this is all part of patinas or histories of surfaces, and that's what I was drawn to in terms of working on surfaces. So who knows who put this piece of tape on? I mean, there are a number of hands involved in just this one piece here, plus me just capturing it. When I'm in the alleyway, the artists that are working there spraying away and stuff, wondering what am I doing 2 inches away from the poles when I should be photographing these walls that they're working on, you know, because that's really what it's all about. But this is what I find what it's all about, are all the layers, all the history here. I mean, there are, who knows how many different hands were involved in this. Occasionally, you can see a little scraping here. I'll take a knife and travel deeper into the surfaces if they're not all available at the time. And occasionally they get completely oversprayed and then, or painted out. Then you have to go dig it. Yes.
Really interesting that this is kind of a foil to your collage, right? Whereas you're capturing and moving around a lot of other artists' artwork, here you're creating a still of the kind of collaboration that's already formed.
Yeah, and the way that your collage collaborations are so intentional. These are like the accident.
Right, right. But they're very collage-like.
Yes.
Because they are different people, and it's again, it would be more what you would consider digital collage, right? Because it's not, although it is tactile and it existed for a moment in time, it also is, you know, temporal. It's just, it's what it is at the moment that I capture it, and then it's gone. I have a couple of friends who have said, I wish I could paint these. And I've had people tell me, you should paint these.
Nah. I mean, it just goes to say that there's nothing off the table. There's nothing you can't do.
Right, right. Yeah.
I mean, the painting comment is also interesting given your background with, you know, creating those faux textures and surfaces.
Yeah.
Because the photograph, like, it certainly captures, and you know that it had a texture and a depth and a dimension because it is a photo. But
Right.
that notion of painting it is
Yeah,
kind
exactly.
of that. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
I find that the border also is an interesting aspect of these because with the collage, or setting the border, you're like, okay, this is the 8.5 by 11 or whatever size it is.
Right. Yeah.
And that's where the surface is. And this is a photograph of something that, you know, there's stuff going on around this.
Well, exactly.
And the nature of taking a photo of it creates the border.
Right. Well, it's again, it's part of how you capture, and how you crop. These aren't cropped after the fact. These are cropped as I'm shooting them, and you'll probably notice that if you look to the right or the left, because these are cylindrical, they start to fade off or get, you know, they curve and are blurry. Almost all of this work here is shot from poles. And when they're really close, you don't notice the roundness, but as I step back a little bit, you do around the edges. And I did a lot of work with boxcars as well, but I didn't decide not to bring those. Lastly, I'm just going to show this. This is where I've taken my photographs and collaged over the top of them. So these are ones where, and I've also worked a little bit with colored pencil and some oil crayon as well. But these are ones in which I've taken photographs and printed them on some receptive paper, and then gone back and collaged them and worked with them and added to them in that way. Subtly coloring in some instances, and sometimes just pasting an image. This one was just one image.
have you sent any of these out for collaboration on? Like you take the photo and send them out for people to collage over?
I haven't done that part of it yet. You know, the printing here, I printed 20 images off of from a friend's press because I haven't, you know, I've hesitated. When I was in printmaking, the notion of working on paper and there was a sensibility to how you finished it up. As a photographer, most of my black and whites ended up being just development and contact sheets. I never really printed much. And with the digital stuff, I haven't printed much at all. It sort of existed as, like I say, as digital information. Here's one where this is the background and this was the finish. So you can see how I played off of by just adding a little bit. And that's it for my presentation of work. I'll turn it back to, let's see, turn it back to.
Thanks, James. Thanks so much. I mean, this has been great to see your work and to see such variety. I think the themes that everybody is mentioning about the kind of the temporal aspects of your work and also the multiple artists is just really encouraging, especially in this time where a lot of people are feeling separated. I think I've got well, lots of questions, but I also would like to bring this back to like your first point where you're talking about in your really early work being interested in the matrix. And I was just wondering how you feel like that matrix or grids applies to the work that you're most excited about right now.
Well, again, that's the exploration with printing things out from the digital aspect and then adding to them. You know, the working the collage on a printed surface. So it all, in a sense, all of my stuff exists on my hard drive, and the hard drive is a matrix in a sense that can spit out all of these images if I release them in a certain way. So in terms of how I think about it, I guess I still feel that the matrix is something that's part of how I work. When I was doing collaborative work, when I was collaborating for decorative work, in a sense, I was the matrix in that all the information came into me. I had to look at a dozen fabrics and talk to the designer and the and maybe a person that's hanging drapes and get all the information together before I actually did the work. But when I did the work, it just went on the wall. So in a sense, it was like being a negative and then making a print in a way by taking all the information in and then laying it all out on a hard surface at one time. Any other questions?
When you're doing your collage work, do you are you going through books one at a time and cutting things?
No.
Or are you have you already like curated that vast amount of?
I have all these. Basically, I go through books and put them into envelopes, and then I have dozens and dozens of envelopes, and they go into boxes, and then I take out envelopes. Some of them are set to color, some of them are engravings. Kind of throw them together and then take it from there. So there's a randomness to it for the most part. They do start out as books that I start to take things away from. Yeah.
James?
Yes.
I would like to ask about a few things. One is the process. There's, you know, the process, or what you consider to be the process. Certainly with I get with the collages, there's a process of play, but when you're going, if you could discuss with us the process of your photography And to me, it seems there's a couple of aspects. Like there are a lot of photographers who and painters who paint and the same motif over and over again. But your motif in photography, even though you do it over and over again, is each one, you have the privilege of having each one be very different. And I'd like you to discuss the fact that while you're doing the same thing, you're doing something very different. And finally, in the images that you, especially in the photography, there's a certain type of ambiance there, a certain type of cosmic ambiance, I would call, that seems to permeate there. And I'd like you to discuss that also.
Big questions. Well, as far as the photography, the images go, I think that this is akin to this notion that it's always new. When I'm going to places, it's always new. It's always fresh. I go there, I take my camera. I'm never sure what I'm going to find, but I'll always find something. There's always something there. And so on the one hand, it's different because, yeah, physically, I could return to the same spot the next day and it would be different. But I give it a break of a few weeks between my saunters. And there are other surfaces that I do. But yeah, on the one hand, it's very similar. I'm using the same machine and I'm basically walking the same square footage and dealing with the square inches, but those square inches are always changing. As far as the cosmic aspect of it, I think that goes more into this notion of, I guess it's what I see. I mean, what I'm sharing is what I see. It's when I'm looking for a detail, it's sort of like if I'm painting a wall and it's got a bad roller stipple on it, and I'm supposed to be laying a straight line, or I'm working with a steel comb, and every time it hits the bumps in the wall, it's going to chatter, as opposed to being clean lines. And in the same way that when I'm looking at surfaces, they're always going to be a little different. They're always going to be a little odd. And so, you know, I might vary from, you know, being 2 inches away. I don't use the telephoto. I basically mechanically take the camera, and it's got a macro lens built into it, and I just bring it in, and I can see what I'm doing when I'm doing it. And you know, there's a lot of the stuff doesn't work for me, and a lot of it gets dumped. So, you know, what I save is what I like. And there is quite a variety there, as you're well aware, because you've been looking at this stuff for years. Does that answer the question? I mean, in terms of the cosmic part of it, I mean, I think it's just about being present again. You know, it's about this notion of and that goes along with the point of capture. It's about being there and being aware at that particular point in time. And you know, that's true of the collage. You know, you have all these elements and you're laying them out, but when you're actually working on them and putting them together, it's not about, I'm not thinking about necessarily physically how to fit one to the other. They just sort of flow together, and that's part of how it works for me.
Yeah, I was thinking that earlier when you first started presenting the photography, and now how it may inform your collage work as well. It was interesting, like it's as if you have no like hang-ups on your way of seeing, and you just see. You're not like so you don't like look at something and see the figure right away. You see a texture or material or a way that the light plays off a surface. And in the same way, when you go back to do collage, you're not so hung up on like, you know, what this figure means or how it typically is presented, and and it helps maybe inform like creative ways of organizing more figurative items as well.
I think that's true. Yeah. I think, there is some limitation because I do take these envelopes that have a discrete number of elements in them. So it's not totally random. But at the same time, I try to put a randomness element into it by choosing a disparate number of elements to put together.
I'm curious about your decision process, and I don't know if there's an easy answer to that, but how you determine when's your stopping point, like with the collages, when do you decide to step away?
That's an excellent point. And because I've had this discussion with many of my friends about where do you stop? I think every artist that's working in an additive process or even in a subtractive process, there's a point where you say, you question maybe, is that enough? Or maybe you just know intrinsically, that's it, it's done. I tend to want to lean on I try not to do, I find that some of my more successful stuff is less is more. When I'm doing collaborative stuff, that's been a good training for me because since I'm going to be sending it off for someone else to work on, particularly the one-on-ones, I call them halfway measures. I do half, then somebody else does it. You don't want to have it too developed for the other person. Well, when you could, but I tend to put in just a few elements and let the other person take care of it. I think it works out to be a lot of fun doing it that way. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. And I'm also curious, like your collaboration, are they all people that you know, or do you also collaborate with strangers?
They're all strangers.
Like, how does it work? Like, they're all strangers.
With the exception of a gentleman over here, Michael Rayson, in terms of actual sharing pieces of paper with people and sending things off, they're all strangers initially. Basically, I got into this by sharing collages in a collage groups where you're sharing your own work. But then there were these offshoots of collaborative work, and I found, because I like doing collaboration, that I got drawn into that. And so they were everyone was a stranger to me. But then you look at their work and you see that there's a kinship there and a flow that develops. And I've had some wonderful connections with a variety of people. The NEC, the Neo Exquisite Corpse Group, which is where three people are working together. There's been some wonderful combinations of working with people. Some of them are little old ladies in Germany that are like, and I'm no spring chicken, but these are little you see photographs of them and you say, wow, here's Granny and look what she's whipping out here. It's pretty amazing stuff. So there's always surprises, and I just sort of wound my way through asking, you want to collaborate? How about it? We'll find a third and we'll do it. And that's kind of how it gets started. And then you find people that you have a connection to that you can play with more. But you want to leave that safety too and go off and explore with other people. And that's kind of what I've been doing. So I have like 4 or 5, right now I think I have 5 or 6 different NEC groups out there that I've sent out, different ones. And I just have another passbook that just came in. So there's always that going on. And at the same time, I don't want to lose sight of my own work, aside from the collaborative stuff, because you can get caught up in doing just the collaborative stuff. And I need to feel I've got to stay back in my own stuff as well. So.
Do you find that the different collaborative groups produce different work, or do you look at them and you think, like distinctly different? Like, do you look at it and you're like, oh yeah, well, that's a conversation that I can only have with these three people, and that's the work that comes out of it, and then this other group is something else, or do they all merge together?
I think it's sort of in between, not quite one or the other. I think that the people that join these kind of groups, there's a general sensibility there, and some of them, you find are going to work better than others, but that doesn't mean that you can't work with them anyway. I think that I don't think there's wildly different within the groups. There's wildly different aspects. I think that different groups promote different kinds of things. I mean, there's some people that work mostly abstract and not figuratively, for example. And it doesn't mean you can't play with both. But there's a definite kinship, I think, to the people that form the groups. I mean, these are people, these groups have 1,700 people in them. You're not going to collaborate with, I mean, if you've been in any groups, you know that 80% of the people are not going to be doing much except hanging out and looking, observing, but there will be those people that are active, and those are the people you want to play with.
Do you find that the source imagery or the kind of motifs are different from country to country? Do you notice any of that?
Yeah, I think there's some of that. Yeah, there's a couple of people in Spain in particular. There seems to be in Barcelona and in other parts of Spain. There's a sensibility there that I really like a lot, and having to do with working with different kinds of old papers as well, and a little more sparse in their imagery. I tend to go back and forth between jamming stuff up a lot and trying to keep it on the simple side. I tend to be a little bit on the busier side because I always feel like I'm creating some kind of narrative, not for myself, but hopefully for other people when they see it.
James, how long do collaborations go on?
In terms of?
Or to put it another way, how many times do you touch one of those pieces as it's being passed around? Is it only once, or are you?
Once, yeah, basically once. In other words, so far anyway. I have talked to people and brought in the notion that, particularly what I call halfway measures. I started a group called Halfway Measures, although other people were doing it long before, of two people collaborating back and forth. And sometimes, the mindset is when you're collaborating, all right, you do it, and then I'll do it, and then it's done. But that's not necessarily true. I could do it, send it back to you. You could work on it as well a second time after you started it if you wanted to add more to it. So, in that sense, I don't think there's an ending to it. But I think in terms of the structure of the groups, for the most part, I think everybody's mindset is it's once around. So with a threesome, you start out with one, you send it to a second person, then they send it to a third person, and then it goes back to you because you started it. So each set goes to two other people.
James, I have a question about.
Yes, Thomas.
Sorry, Prince. I'm just fascinated by the fact that you spent decades recreating textures of largely natural materials, and that so much of your work seems to focus on, there's the natural work, where there are sort of images of growth and decay, you could say, just to divide it broadly.
Yep.
And then the parallels between that and what you're capturing on those poles, for example, which are kind of like the result of human animals going about some activity and leaving all of their traces behind. I mean, it's also natural in a much different way.
Right.
And I don't really know where I'm going. I don't know if I have a particular question. I think this links back to the cosmic issue, maybe.
Yeah.
Because there's sort of a quality of entropy or like something on its way to becoming something, but not done.
Yeah. Well, I think also it has to do with the sense of temporality that when I'm capturing, as I said, it's going to be gone tomorrow. And so in that sense, in terms of life force, in this sense of flow, it is sort of a capture of an immediate point. And as you say, it's what I'm capturing are the efforts, the endeavors of a number of other people in a very small capture. But again, it's only so temporary, you know. So in that sense, it's like visiting a cemetery in a way, you know. Only with the stones, they're captured for in a static way, where these are chunks of time that people are passing through. Maybe it's more like Our Town, if you are familiar with that old story.
I mean, it seems like so like much different. The mindset seems so different, like from the faux painting work you did somehow. I can't quite put a finger on it. It's almost like the latter, your other stuff is almost like a rebellion against that. And I'm sure you don't see it that way, but just from an outside perspective.
Yeah. I guess the connection that I make is that when I was doing the work that I was doing in terms of architectural painting or faux finish or whatever, I was working primarily with transparency. So I was working with color, like watercolors or something, combining colors. If they were opaque, they would be one thing. If they were very transparent, they'd be another thing. There'd be the play off of the wall color and the color that you're laying over it in the places where they would mesh, and then texturing it and working the surfaces up that way. Plus the whole physical aspect of me, I called it dancing on the walls. I put on a raga first thing in the morning, and it starts out very slow with an alap, but then it builds and builds and builds. And by the end, you've got, Tintal or something where it's going 16 beats, and you're banging on the wall. Well, I call it like dancing on the walls. I'm working with rags or steel wool with particular kinds of brushes, a variety of different things. But you also have to work till it's done. But I think that all of that sensibility sort of is reflected in a way that these paintings that I sort of see in the alleyway are captures in a kind of a similar way, only much more complex in a way. It's nothing that I could actually do with my hands to make that happen. It's something that just happens. You know? I mean, it doesn't just happen. It's made to happen.
It seems to me, James, that I'm listening with the gentleman who just talked and you, that there's a combination there of what you were doing, which was very much directed, like you said, if it was you're trying to get a smooth thing on the wall and there's a little blip there and that spreads it out and it's not supposed to be there and all that is. So on the one hand, there's this type of looking and seeing things, with textures and stuff that you've had, but having to do it in a certain way. And if you didn't do it in a certain way, the customer is going to be pissed. And now looking at textures, and you can go out and you can look at it in the way you want to and do it whatever way you want to and see it whatever way you want to, and nobody's going to be pissed about it.
Well,
they may even like it.
I suppose there's that aspect to it, Michael. Well, I know this has been longer than I think maybe was anticipated. I don't know. Are there any more questions or?
I have one question.
Sure.
I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes.
I have a question about going back to the collage work and just the initial group that you showed us of just collage pieces, figurative pieces from books and whatnot.
Yeah.
Has there ever been, and this might be related to the cosmic aspect as well, but has there ever been a piece that you completed and kind of knew, okay, this is complete, and then the actual, like the random combination of those pieces spoke to you in such a way that it really stuck with you
Yeah,
and sort of felt more
it does happen. Yeah.
transcendent than, or maybe that's happened often, or maybe once or a few times, or and with the combinations of like, you know, bringing in iconography and just how you can get certain images put together and juxtaposed. Yeah, has that ever happened?
Yeah, certainly. I think, you know, I've spent my life pretty much working alone in a way. Even though I talk about collaboration, when I was, for all those years, I was painting walls, decorating walls. You know, I was in a room by myself all day long. You know, when you're working as an artist, you're basically alone and you're in the moment. And similarly, working the walls or working with the collage, you're in the moment, capturing with a camera. Again, it's about being alone in the moment for the most part. So coming up with a collage that is more than just the sum of its pieces does happen. But it's similar to taking all the photographs I take. You know, I shared with you a lot of photographs. Well, you know, I've probably taken 100 times as many that I've disposed of, and there's probably another 100 times or 10 times or 20 times more, certainly that I have that I didn't share. Well, out of all of those, I mean, I didn't painstakingly take what I thought was the best of either of these things, of either my collages or my photographs. I just took what is most recent for me for the most part. There's some older ones, but for the most part, it's more recent. That doesn't mean that some of the older things aren't treasured to me or weren't, you know, moments of having something cosmic, if you want to call it that. There are certainly some that, and a lot of them are things that I've given away and that I've shared with other people. And so there's something nice to be able to share that as well, to feel that you've done something and then you're giving it away as opposed to hanging on to it. You know, that's part of the notion of making things not quite so precious.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And I think that comes with the sharing also, right? No.
Just to bring it back to the matrix, when you walk into that beautiful bookstore, which I just need to find in Boston, that outdoor space looks so fantastic. I'm curious if it is like the matrix for you, where the books that have your source material pop out and you just sort of see them, or whether or not you have to open every book to find it. So I'm curious, like how long they just pop out. So you're like you just walk through there like a magician, and you just like speak to you. They like get pushed out of the wall.
I'm so familiar with that space, and even though it's like just like the graffiti alley, it's changing all the time. The characters are never the same. I can sniff what I want by looking at the bindings for the most part. And
that was actually my question. Could you tell from the binding if there's like gold in there?
Sometimes. Yeah. Sometimes you can. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. I mean, it used to be like back in the album days, looking at albums, you know, you could look at an album and then decide whether or not what you're going to find inside was something that would be tantalizing. And that's about, you know, that's part of risk. You know, you take the risk, you take a chance.
It happens in my life on a regular basis with records.
Yeah, well, I have hundreds of records. I have very hungry ears, so I listen to a lot of stuff. Feed my head all the time. Well, it was a pleasure to talk with you all, and I appreciate giving me your eyes and ears for a little while. In terms of contact, I think is there something there, Rebecca, in terms of contact information, in terms of if people want to reach me individually, or I can make that happen?
Sure. Do you want to put it in the chat and then people can grab it if you see that on the bottom of your screen?
I see chat. Yeah. What do I do?
Oh,
Just
you
go
just
down?
you just type it and it'll go to
Okay.
everybody. If you
Oh,
say
good.
everyone in meeting.
All
Yeah,
right.
and then everybody can just grab it from there.
Okay, good, good. Well, I'll do that.
Find you.
Yeah, you'll find me? I hope so.
Where to find you.
Clay knows how to find you.
Okay, good.
Well,
Good.
Thanks so much, James.
thank you.
Thank you so
really
much,
appreciate
Thank
it.
you
James.
so much. It's been
Thank
great to
you.
have you.
Thank you, James.
Okay.
Beautiful work.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Nice job. Nice job.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you.
Now, do I leave to go to chat?
Oh, you could, if you
Or do I
type
go to
it
chat
now,
first?
it'll be there, but go to chat first. I can also, if anyone emails me, I can email them your address.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Good. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. See you.